The moment Alexander Crane pushed open the heavy glass door to his office, his eyes locked on Marcus Thompson, his black employee, crouched beside the gleaming mahogany desk, frantically stuffing thick stacks of confidential company contracts into a large leather backpack. Alexander's mouth went dry, his coffee cup trembling in his hand as if the universe itself had stopped to witness the betrayal unfolding before him. Marcus, who had been one of Crane's most trusted employees for nearly a decade, with a reputation for discretion, intelligence, and loyalty, was now caught red-handed in an act that defied every expectation Alexander had ever had of him. The office, a high-rise sanctuary overlooking the city below, was silent except for the muffled rustle of papers as Marcus's hands fumbled over the documents, sweat beading on his forehead, eyes darting desperately as if he could somehow erase what had already happened. In that instant, Alexander's mind reeled with disbelief, rage, and an almost physical pain, a sensation akin to watching someone he loved and trusted plunge a knife into his chest. Every meticulous lesson he had given Marcus over the years, every word of guidance, mentorship, and warning about integrity seemed to evaporate in the face of this shocking scene. Alexander's mind raced, struggling to process how someone who had been like family in the halls of Crane Enterprises could suddenly appear as a threat, a betrayer, a man whose very presence in the office had turned the pristine space into a stage for his audacious transgression. The scattered contracts, some half-crumpled, some spilling out onto the marble floor, each bore the weight of potential ruin. Financial loss, corporate scandal, the kind of legal repercussions that could destroy not just Marcus, but the entire reputation of the empire Alexander had painstakingly built over decades. For a few surreal seconds, time itself seemed suspended. The skyline outside the glass walls continued to shine under the morning sun, oblivious to the storm raging inside, as Alexander's gaze fixed on Marcus, who now froze completely, realizing he had been caught, the gravity of the moment crashing down on him like a tidal wave. Alexander could see the fear etched deep into Marcus's eyes, the panic that reflected a man who had allowed desperation to override loyalty, and yet, underneath the immediate shock and anger, there was also a strange, undeniable recognition. Marcus's actions were the culmination of invisible pressures, hidden debts, and a personal crisis that had never been shared, never voiced, never acknowledged by anyone, not even Alexander. And in that instant, the office, with its polished floors, sleek furniture, and panoramic view of the city, felt suddenly claustrophobic, suffocating, a cage in which the billionaire and his most trusted employee were trapped together, confronting a reality that neither had anticipated. Alexander's breathing was measured but tense, each step he took across the office sounding louder than normal, the echo bouncing off the marble floors as he approached Marcus with a mix of disbelief and controlled fury. Marcus tried to speak, his voice barely above a whisper, as he stammered out half-formed excuses about unpaid medical bills, debts incurred by family emergencies, and the need to secure some of the company's assets as collateral for loans he had taken in secret. Alexander's mind filtered the words through years of experience and instinct. Each syllable sounded hollow, insufficient, inadequate in explaining the enormity of what had just occurred. The scattered papers, the open safe in the corner, and the faint scratches on the lock that betrayed Marcus's tampering painted a damning picture. Alexander could feel the betrayal in his chest like a physical weight, pressing down, reminding him that trust, once broken, could be impossible to rebuild. Yet he also saw Marcus's eyes, wide with fear and genuine panic, and the contrast struck him with a strange force. The same man who could lie to save himself also seemed paralyzed by the enormity of his own actions, as though he had underestimated the consequences even as he committed the act. Alexander's mind raced through the possible outcomes. Fire him on the spot, call security and the authorities, protect the company but ruin a life, or attempt to understand, to uncover the pressures and desperation that could drive a man to betray someone who had invested in him, guided him, and trusted him implicitly. The room seemed to shrink as Alexander's thoughts spun faster, the city outside irrelevant compared to the tension inside, the moral and practical implications of the betrayal twisting together in a knot of anger, pity, and frustration. Marcus, meanwhile, sank into a chair, hands clasped tightly over the backpack that still contained some of the stolen documents, as if holding on to them could somehow justify the chaos he had created. Alexander noticed the tremor in his hands, the pallor of his face, the slight quiver in his voice as he tried to explain, and despite the rage surging through him, he realized that human desperation often created contradictions. A man capable of great loyalty could also, under unseen pressure, commit acts that defied logic, morality, and trust simultaneously. The office seemed to shrink further under the weight of the silence, as Marcus's breathing came in uneven, shallow gasps. His head bowed in guilt, and Alexander circled him like a predator assessing both the threat and the prey, each step echoing ominously across the marble floor. The sunlight pouring through the floor-to-ceiling windows cut across the polished surfaces of the office, reflecting off the scattered papers, the leather backpack, and the faint scratches on the mahogany desk, casting long, dramatic shadows that made the scene look like a painting of treachery frozen in time. Alexander's mind raced, thinking through every angle, the legal ramifications, the potential corporate fallout, the internal scandal, the whispers that would inevitably spread through the ranks if word of Marcus's betrayal leaked beyond the office walls. And yet, beyond the immediate practical consequences, there was something far more complex gnawing at him. The understanding that human frailty, pressure, and desperation could create moments of explosive recklessness that no training, loyalty program, or moral lecture could prevent. Marcus lifted his eyes slightly, and Alexander caught a glimpse of the depth of the personal torment that had led to this moment. Sleepless nights, financial anxiety, a family depending on him, and the feeling of being trapped in circumstances he could not control, all converging in a single catastrophic act of betrayal. The irony, the tragedy, and the raw emotion of the scene coalesced into something almost surreal. The man Alexander had mentored, guided, and trusted was not a villain in the classical sense, but a human being pushed beyond his limits, caught in a moral and emotional pressure cooker that had exploded spectacularly in the billionaire's pristine office. The leather backpack lay open, spilling the stolen contracts onto the floor, some crumpled, some partially torn, the paper seeming to mirror the unraveling of Marcus's life and career. The tools for breaking into the safe glinted faintly in the sunlight, metallic and cold, a stark reminder of the premeditation of the act. Alexander's gaze softened briefly as he considered the complexity of human behavior, but the weight of responsibility and leadership bore down on him immediately afterward. He could not ignore the act, condone it, or pretend it hadn't happened. And yet, amidst the storm of anger, disbelief, and shock, a tiny ember of curiosity sparked. What circumstances, unseen, desperate, and private, had driven a man so loyal and intelligent to risk everything in a single reckless moment? Alexander realized that this incident, while catastrophic in its implications, was also an opportunity to understand, to uncover, and perhaps to intervene before the consequences destroyed a life completely. Finally, after what felt like hours but was likely only minutes, Alexander exhaled deeply, the sound resonating through the office like a release of tension too long restrained, as he motioned for Marcus to remain seated and instructed the security team, who had arrived silently as backup, to hold their position and not intervene immediately. Marcus, still frozen in shock, realized the gravity of the billionaire's decision. In a world where betrayal of this scale often meant immediate termination or even legal action, Alexander had paused, hesitated, and considered something far more nuanced, the human story behind the shocking act. The room, bathed in the warm morning light, felt simultaneously oppressive and revealing, highlighting the scattered papers, the open safe, and the subtle quivers in Marcus's posture, yet also illuminating the possibilities for understanding and redemption. Alexander's mind raced with questions about morality, loyalty, desperation, and human behavior, each thought colliding with the next in a storm of calculation and empathy. He thought of the invisible pressures, the financial burdens, the family obligations, and the silent struggles that had likely driven Marcus to this desperate, reckless act, and he recognized the fragility of even the strongest professional bonds. Outside, the city sparkled as if nothing had happened, oblivious to the drama unfolding in the high-rise office, yet inside, Alexander Crane understood an unsettling truth. Power, wealth, and control could dictate many things, but they could not dictate the human heart, and even the most disciplined and loyal individuals could break under the weight of unseen circumstances. As he studied Marcus's trembling figure, the spilled contracts, the glinting tools, and the polished office around him, Alexander realized that the act of betrayal, shocking as it was not merely an event. It was a complex narrative of desperation, fear, and human vulnerability, a reminder that the world of billionaires and empires, though calculated and controlled, was never immune to the raw unpredictability of human life. And as the minutes stretched, filled with silence, tension, and unspoken understanding, Alexander decided that his next steps would not just involve punishment, but investigation, guidance, and perhaps the rarest commodity in a world of money and power: compassion, insight, and the attempt to prevent a single desperate act from destroying everything built on years of trust and loyalty.